Welcome back to Callsign Horus, where we are finally talking about the Explosive Sunset event that happened about 2 weeks ago. Now, for those of you who are unaware, G2 hosts an event called Explosive Sunset. It's a Milsim Light operation in which they set off fireworks and they play into the night. It's a lot of fun. I have never gotten to stay for the night portion before for several reasons, the biggest one being lack of time. However, this last Explosive Sunset, I noticed something among the community. A lot of people were really unhappy with the event, and it's actually really unfortunate because I really like G2 as a group, and I really like their new field at Camp Victory, but not a lot of people liked their event. So what I've decided to do with this video is sit down and try and figure out exactly what went wrong. And I've talked to a lot of different people from both sides of the game. I've talked to people on green team, I've talked to people on tan team. And the thing that I noticed that keeps coming up is something that I think can be solved very easily. So we'll get into all that. But before we get into the video, I'm going to ask you all to do me a favor. If you would be so kind as to leave some encouraging words for G2, because this last event I think was a little bit of a blow to morale. It's hard to run a field, it's hard to run a good event, and they didn't luck out this time, which is very unfortunate. So if you could leave some encouraging words in the comments for them, it would mean a lot to me, and I'm sure it would mean a lot to them. Also, if you do enjoy this video, please consider hitting the like button, subscribe for additional content of this manner, and if you really want to help out the channel, there's going to be a link in the description below to my Patreon where you can send me $1, $5, $10, $1 million, whatever you're comfortable spending. I don't judge if you decide not to, but I am exceptionally thankful if you decide to. With that all out of the way, let's get into this. So the first thing that I think needs to be mentioned when it comes to airsoft games is there's kind of 3 different categories that need to be addressed, or, well, done well at the very least, and those 3 categories are balance, simplicity, and fun. Balance is simple. The game needs to be fair between the factions that are playing against one another, usually green team versus tan team, or red versus blue, or Russian LARPers versus US LARPers, whatever, right? You need to make sure that the game isn't too one-sided, or else people start to get really unhappy. The next one, being simplicity, is very self-explanatory. The objective needs to be simple enough that everyone understands what they're supposed to do, so they can go do it. Take this objective, defend this objective, shoot the enemy team, grab this box and take it to this place. If you don't have a simple objective, people get confused, and, well, the game starts to fall apart. And last but not least, fun. Fun is the hardest one to actually get because you can't control people's emotions, thankfully. But there are ways to incite fun, even though it's not something you can just make happen, unlike balance and simplicity. So, getting into the first aspect, let's talk about team balance. Explosive Sunset did not have fantastic team balance. From what I could gather, it was 30 v 20, tan players being 20 in number, green players being 30 in number. Now, on the surface, this is not a problem until you count for the fact that green was on defense and highly organized. I'm going to speak from anecdotal evidence here, and I will also be reading here in a second some messages I had with Ryan, the leader of the SWAT, or Sissies with Adult Toys team, that was playing for the green faction during the event, about just how well organized green was. So first things first, my anecdote. I never saw less than like 5 green players together. It was always a team doing something in an organized manner, taking on usually a disorganized tan force. Everybody had radios. There was a clear chain of command. People knew where they were going and what they were doing. Whereas on tan, rumor has it they didn't have that. I even ran into a few solo players or people just in teams of like 2 or 3, which isn't a bad thing by itself, but when you're on offense, that's super hard to actually do anything with, because, you know, you're 1 or 2 people, and if one of you gets shot, the assault basically bogs down. Versus a team of 5 to 10, you have an incredible number of people who can do a lot, and even if a few people get shot, you can push on the assault. And now I'm going to read a little bit of a conversation I had with the leader of SWAT, in which we kind of talked about the event and kind of discussed what we think went wrong. The first thing I asked Ryan is, since they kind of wound up acting as the de facto command structure for Green, do they think that affected the outcome of the event? Ryan says that he does not know, he just said he did his best. Green CO told them to harass the Tan team and stop them from getting new objectives, so that's what they did. And if I could speak freely, they did that exceptionally well. Ryan also says that SWAT may have gone a little bit easy on Tan Team, but Tan Team suffered immensely from a lack of communication and a lack of organization. I then asked Ryan about the 10-man team he or a different leader of SWAT had, and he said that that group was very much effective because most of the leadership and most of the members of SWAT are ex-military or ex-law enforcement or active duty military or law enforcement, meaning they had a lot of real practice with the kind of shit that helps you in airsoft, that being teamwork and communication. We also just talked about some of the things their team does, sponsors and whatnot, but when it comes to the event itself, it was very much agreed on that Tan did not have very good anything, really, when it came to communication or organization, and a lot of that stemmed from the fact that a lot of strong players were on Green Team, a lot of weak players were on Tan, the numbers didn't match up, and Tan was on the offensive. Another thing I'd like to touch on here is the addition of the Black admin team. Now, the guys in Black were invincible, right? But they kept getting swapped between Green and Tan team, adding a crazy layer of hell because you didn't know whose side they were on. You were supposed to just run away from them, which isn't great for game balance because if they show up, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, the battle's over and now I have to go walk away. Not very fun. But we'll get into more of that in the fun aspect. The Black team was very confusing. Not exactly the best idea that G2 ever had, I'm sorry to say, but it is what it is. Alright, let's get into the simplicity. This event was not very simple. From what I can remember, there were 3 big aspects that made this event very complicated, which is not very great for anything, but it is what it is. So, the objective was, Green Team would be defending a series of mortars. They were allowed to respawn at the mortars or 300 feet out of combat. Tan had a dedicated respawn point, and they had to take mortars. Once Tan took a mortar, that became their next dedicated respawn point. Green could not retake mortars. It was never entirely determined how you seize a mortar, but I believe the general rule, if I remember correctly, was that Tan had to push out all of the Green forces, and then they secured the mortar, right? Although, I think a flag system would have helped a lot, like you have to put up a little flag, or you have to knock over something, or something that would be a visual indicator to both sides that the objective is taken. That would have helped immensely, but that's not what happened. Now, the mortar seizing by itself was difficult, however, there was another aspect that made this very complicated, which was not everyone knew where all the mortars were. We were actually issued maps. When you signed in, you got a patch map and a dead rag. The problem is the map didn't show you anything, really. It was just kind of a top-down view of the field, which shows you trees. That's pretty much it. You basically get to see trees, because it was shot during the summer. If this was shot during, say, fall or winter, when you could have seen through the canopy of the trees and seen the roads, this map would have been exceptionally helpful because you would be able to actually look at the roads, look at some landmarks, and be able to figure out where you are with the map. But because you're only able to look at the canopy of the trees, the map is basically useless unless you make your own and overlay it on top of this one. So it was a nice addition, but it didn't really help anyone. Even strong players like myself and many other members of Green Team who were trying to get off the field at one point were looking at the map and just saying, we can't use this because there are no roads marked on it. There are just dots that say this is where this thing is, and you have to figure out where that is from where you are. And you don't know where you are because you're surrounded by landmarks that you can't identify through a fucking canopy of trees that you can't see through. So the map wasn't very helpful. So you were pretty much reliant on knowing where everything is beforehand or being told where everything is. Neither one of those are good, because if you don't know the field like the back of your hand, you're screwed. I mean, hell, I remember G2's old field, Dayton's original Battlegrounds. It was a relatively small field, but it was big enough that you could actually figure out what was going on 99% of the time. You knew exactly what someone meant when they said two-story. You knew exactly what someone meant when they said X building, when someone said warehouses, when someone said burn pit, the pond, trenches, back alley. These were all areas that people knew. Hell, train tracks. That was an area that everyone knew. This new field, Camp Victory, when someone says, oh yeah, we're going to Ghost Town, if you don't know the road layout and you don't know how to get to Ghost Town, you're going to be lost. So people getting lost was a major problem. Compounding this issue was the fact that a lot of players on Tan Team especially did not use radios or did not have radios. Meaning that if they weren't next to somebody with a radio, they could not be told, hey, we're doing this, can you guys do some other thing to help us push? That didn't happen. Green Team, on the other hand, had radios down pat, and we had a rough idea of where we were because, again, stronger players were on green. So the simplicity of the game was seriously marred by a confusing objective, a confusing map layout, but worst of all, the medic rules I don't think were very well understood. Both teams had 3 medics. One head medic who was immortal, but if shot at ran away, and 2 regular players who were handed medic bags. They could revive players. However, they had a sheet of paper they had to read to figure out what they needed to do to heal the guy. So if you were one of the head medics, this was a really cool mechanic because you knew what you were supposed to do and you could heal the guy and get him back into the game quickly. If you were a player who was handed these medic bags, you were very confused. Just brutally confused. I was not a medic, but I do know for a fact that green medics really didn't do too much because not very many green players actually got engaged. And when they did get engaged, usually all of them went down because there wasn't a medic nearby. Which is weird how that worked, because it's like when we had a medic, no one died, but when we didn't, we all got slaughtered, which is weird. But hey, you know, shit happens. The medic rules are cool, though. I don't want to say that these were a bad idea. The medic rules were an absolutely amazing idea, but they were not super great explained. I mean, the sheet of paper was a great idea because it taught you what to do in the moment, but I don't think a lot of players understood the idea of the medic bag and the medic rules. And of course, I'm not going to just sit here and say G2 is the ones to blame for that. It's entirely players for not paying attention and not reading tax ops, which you should do, buddy. You should always read the rules and listen during the briefing, but for the players who didn't do that, they were stupidly confused. And players who have a hard time listening to begin with, having to sit through a lengthy explanation of all these things, probably weren't going to have the greatest time anyway. The last thing that we need to talk about is the fun aspect. Now, fun, again, not something you can control, but I'm going to tell you the 3 things that I think seriously detrimented everyone's enjoyment of the event. Number 1, it was freezing cold. It was so cold, in fact, that people's gear was continuously locking up. Caleb Tucker, an attendee of the Tan team, his AK went down almost immediately because of the cold. He didn't have any options to keep playing because he didn't bring a spare gun. A lot of other players had gear locking up. Hell, my RPK was struggling a little bit in the cold. Even though Nadia did fantastic, I could still hear her struggling in the cold. The cold also meant that people were wearing exceptionally high amounts of layers, risking dehydrating by sweating to death in their jacket. While I don't think that happened, it was still a risk. And also people wearing too many layers, sometimes you get shot and you just don't feel it, which leads to accusations of cheating. Never a good thing. I'm also going to play a clip right here. I don't know about you, but to me this looks like this guy's just not calling his hits, and I fear it's because he thought green wasn't calling his hits. Side note, never, ever, 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 ever intentionally cheat in Airsoft. It makes you look like a dork and starts fights, and nobody has any fun, so don't do it. Even if the other team is cheating, calmly go to a ref, ask them to observe the team, and call out the guys who are cheating. Never, ever, ever cheat, because worst case scenario, you'll shoot at a cheater, they won't call it, you'll get shot, a ref will see you not call it, and then you'll be in trouble. Or best case scenario, someone thinks you're an asshole. Yeah, that's the best case scenario. Someone thinks you're a dick. You don't get to win if you cheat. Everyone loses. Don't cheat. Period. Don't do it. With that out of the way, the last aspect of fun that I think was seriously detrimenting the game is that they didn't swap green and tan teams' objectives. I'm saying this as someone who attended the event and has attended many events similar to this. When you have a horrible skill and player imbalance, the best thing you can do is swap what the sides are doing. Green team was doing a fantastic job on defense. So much so that tan team was given an objective because green was forced to retreat to get the game to continue. But it didn't help. The best thing that you could have done is stop the game and had green go on the offensive and tan go on the defensive. Tan would have had an easier time defending because even though there's less of them and they're less skilled, it's easier to hold an objective than it is to take an objective. The more numerous and organized green team would have had an easier time storming the objectives than the tan team would have. Thus, the game would have continued at a fairly normal pace, if a little quicker than hoped. The game probably would have benefited immensely from a team swap. However, that didn't happen, unfortunately. With all that being said, what are the 3 things that I highly recommend G2 do in the future to ensure their events go smoother? Number 1, don't host Explosive Sunset so late in the year. It's so late that it's so cold that people's gear lock up, people are freezing, people aren't having fun. Do it earlier in fall, when it's just cold enough that people can wear all their layers and wear all their good gear, and they're not sweating to death, but not so cold that their gear is locking up. 2, don't get too married to a game idea. Tan on offense and green on defense is totally fine in theory, but when you find out that the player imbalance is so bad, don't get married to the idea that tan has to be on the offensive. Just swap them. It's a game. And if no one's having fun, it's not a good game. But if people are having fun, it's a great game. Number 3, the medic rules were a great idea, but I think before you run a huge event with these medic rules, you should run smaller events with them first. Have it just be a normal thing at your open plays for a while, and once people get used to it, you will have the advantage to have it at a big event. And if you find out that a lot of people don't like it, don't be afraid to revisit it or just remove it. I, for one, think the medic rules were a good idea, but definitely were kind of odd the first time using them. With all that being said, I do hope G2 runs another Explosive Sunset with some improvements from last time. Even though I had a good time, I know that not too many people shared my sentiment, which is unfortunate. I hope to see them improve, and I hope to be back at their field soon to enjoy a more organized, more balanced game. If you enjoyed this video, it would mean the world to me if you left a like and left a comment telling me or G2 what they think was wrong, what they think was right, or sorry, what you think was right, my bad, and just overall help me, help them, help everyone. Subscribe for more heresy if you do crave that, and if you want to help the channel, please, for the love of God, description, Patreon, give me $1. I will do anything. I will give you a candy bar. Just please give me that $1. With all that being said, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and, Big Chungus.